Theorizing that one could time travel within his own lifetime, Dr.
Devin
stepped into the quantum leap accelerator and vanished.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the Dev Quantum Leap Show. Through the miracle of modern science, I can leap back in time and become different people in history. Today, we will be traveling to periods from the era of the beginning of the colonies to just after the American Revolution. We will first travel to 1607, where the first colony of Jamestown is being established. Let's go! I'm one of the 144 settlers sent by the Virginia Company to the New World. So far, we have not found any riches for the company, and there have been many difficult times in the new colony. Thankfully, we have Captain John Smith, who helps motivate us and get food from the natives. I don't know what we would do without him. Eventually, the settlers made money from tobacco. The Virginia colony expanded over time and became a royal colony since it wasn't making money for the Virginia Company. After many years of trying, England had finally made a successful colony. More colonies started to appear in America, and more people started to travel there. 3 new sections of colonies were established. They were the New England colonies, Middle colonies, and Southern colonies. Right now, we're going to the New England colonies. Join me. Hello, my name is John. I live in the colony of Rhode Island, which was founded by a minister named Roger Williams. In Rhode Island, people of all religions are able to live here since there is a religious tolerance. Also, it is very difficult to farm in this colony. Many people practice subsistence farming, which means that they produce just enough to meet the needs of their families. There are many small businesses here, like blacksmiths and gunsmiths. Shipbuilding is a very important business here, and so is fishing. Next, let's go to the middle colonies. Hey, my name is Stefan. The colony that I live in is the colony of Pennsylvania. This colony was founded by William Penn, who saw Pennsylvania as a holy experiment. All religions are tolerated, and many cultures have come here. Many people around the middle colonies were farmers because of the more fertile soil and milder climate here. There are different types of industries here, like flour making and carpentry. There are also larger businesses like mines and ironworks. Unlike the New England colonies, the middle colonies have cultural diversity. Lastly, we will go to the southern colonies. Hi, my name is Jake, and I live in the colony of Georgia. This is the last colony that was established by England in America. James Oglethorpe created the colony to help debtors and poor people make a fresh start. This did not work out though, and he gave the colony to the king. Many people make a living by farming since there's rich soil and a warm climate. The main cash crop in Georgia is rice, and there are several plantations here. Unlike the other colonies, the southern colonies have a high demand for slaves to grow the crops. When the English colonists went to America, they brought with them English ideas about government. Some of these ideas included protected rights, representative government, and a Bill of Rights. Eventually, England started to control the trade of the colonies in the 1650s to gain more money. The colonists accepted this at first, but later on, colonists started to smuggle goods onto ships without government permission. This was the beginning of conflicts between the colonies and England. Now, let's see what life was like in the colonies in the 1700s. I'm just a simple man who's trying to make a living in the colonies for his family. In the family, I usually manage the farm and work in the fields. My son is an apprentice for a local craftsman, and my wife helps take care of my children. My little girl plays games at home, and she plays with her homemade toys. Many people in the town are greatly influenced by the Great Awakening. These people believe in a greater religious freedom, and some of them are choosing their own faiths. Also, many people are thinking about civic virtue, democratic ideas, and values of a free society after that Peter Singer trial when he wrote about that governor. In the colonies, there was also a lot of immigration. Because of this, the populations of the colonies skyrocketed up. On the other hand, many people died from several epidemics, which are outbreaks of diseases that affect large numbers of people. This decreased the populations of the colonies too. Next up on the list is the French and Indian War. My name is William Pitt, and I am the British Prime Minister. This is a very stressful time, and the war with the French is still waging on. I've sent more British troops to fight in the war in America. I've also decided that Britain will pay for the war to stop complaints. After the war, the British will raise taxes on the colonists to pay for the military expenses. Hopefully we will win and take over the Ohio River Valley. The French and Indian War started because the British and the French both believed that they had a right to the Ohio River Valley land. After many battles, the British finally won. A treaty called the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763. This gave the Ohio River Valley and Florida to Britain. The British did not treat the Native Americans well, though, and this led to conflict. To stop this conflict, the king made the Proclamation of 1763. This prohibited colonists from living west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, we will go to the era where rebellion started. My name is Samuel Adams, and I'm the leader of the Sons of Liberty. I believe that these new acts passed by the British are outrageous. First of all, the Sugar Act says that officers can seize goods from accused smugglers without going to court. This is ridiculous. We have the right to a trial by jury, and this act offends that. The Stamp Act puts taxes on most printed materials. We should be the ones to regulate taxes, not Britain. Finally, the Townshend Acts tax imported goods before they arrive into the colonies. I say that we should boycott the Brits and make them angry. This tension went even further when the so-called Boston Massacre occurred. I'm Paul Revere, and I've just made my propaganda drawing on the Boston Massacre. I believe that the British soldiers who killed those poor people in Boston are murderers, and that they should be punished for their crimes. The crowd was just throwing sticks and stones that knocked down a soldier, and then the British started firing and killed 5 people. We should fight back for those who died. After that, the Tea Act was passed. This act gave a British tea company total control of the tea market. The colonists didn't want to be told what tea to buy. Because of this, on December 6th, the Sons of Liberty boarded 3 tea ships in Boston and threw 342 chests of tea overboard. This was called the Boston Tea Party, and the colonists celebrated the Bold Act. To control the colonies, Britain passed the Intolerable Acts. These acts were meant to punish the colonies, and Massachusetts received the harshest treatment. In the end, though, the colonies worked together and pulled through this difficult time. In Philadelphia, 55 delegates met to form the Continental Congress. One of the delegates was George Washington. My name is George Washington, and I am in the Continental Congress. So far, this Congress has repealed 13 acts of Parliament and has also voted on boycotting British trade. The delegates have also endorsed the Suffolk Resolution made by the people of Boston. These resolves say that the Intolerable Acts are illegal, and they call on the colonists to arm themselves. The colonies created different militias, which are small armies for different towns. Some militias were known as Minutemen, which were civilians sworn to be ready to fight at a minute's notice. In Boston, British soldiers found where the militia stored their arms in Concord, and they marched out of Boston the next morning. Luckily, a protest leader saw the troops and alerted Paul Revere and William Dawes. They traveled to Concord and spread the news along the way. Eventually, the British troops met a militia in Lexington. It was a glorious battle in Lexington. When we first met the British troops, we realized that we were definitely outnumbered. But, suddenly, a shot was fired and started the battle. 8 of our men died, and the rest of us scattered out. The British troops did not find our stored weapons at Concord, and they lost several troops in battle at North Bridge. As they retreated, many colonists shot at them, killing about 70 British troops. Many more battles were fought, including the Battle of Bunker Hill. People also took sides in the Revolution. Loyalists were people who remained loyal to Britain and the colonies. Patriots were people who favored American independence. In 1775, the Second Continental Congress met because disputes between the colonies and Britain had worsened. This Congress took several steps to begin governing the colonies, like making a post office. A Continental Army was created by this Congress as well. The delegates offered Britain a last chance to avoid war in the Olive Branch Petition, but the king refused. George Washington also played a big role in helping train armies. When I reached Boston in July 1775, I realized that the militia there needed training and discipline. I began the task of turning these civilians into soldiers. I got several weapons into the area, such as cannons and heavy guns. It took several months, but in March 1776, the army was ready. At night, we snuck into the hills overlooking Boston, surprised the British while they slept, and took back the city. Many people started to believe that America should be independent, especially after the publication of the pamphlet Common Sense by Thomas Paine. This caused a huge debate in the Second Continental Congress. Should the colonies be independent or stay under British rule? Eventually, a group of 5 delegates were put together to create a declaration. Thomas Jefferson was voted to be the one to write the document. I wrote the Declaration of Independence. To write it, I used John Locke's idea of natural rights to life, liberty, and property, as well as his idea that governments should protect these rights and should be overthrown if they interfere with these rights. After some changes were made by other delegates, it was approved on July 4th, 1776. There are 4 parts to the Declaration: the preamble, Declaration of Natural Rights, list of grievances, and resolution of independence by the United States. The struggle for independence, the American Revolution, had begun. In the early years of the war, about 20% of the colonial population were loyalists, 45% were patriots, and the rest were neutral. Also, George Washington became the leader of the Continental Army in June 1775. In the Army, the soldiers could only sign up for 1 year. On the other hand, Britain couldn't find a lot of soldiers because service lasted for your whole life. Because of this, they hired German Hessians. In the Middle States, the battle for Long Island was happening. In this battle, Washington and his army were against General Howe and 9,000 Hessians. The British won the battle, and Washington retreated across the Delaware. Before the soldiers' enlistments ran out, Washington led a sneak attack. I was there when our General Washington led that magnificent sneak attack on Trenton. We left Christmas morning and went across the Delaware River. It must have been at least cold enough to freeze your fingers off, but we pushed through it. Eventually, we made it to Trenton, and all the soldiers were asleep. This made it even easier, and we captured about 900 Hessians. This made many of us believe that victory is possible, and we are thinking of signing back up to fight another year. The British made a plan to isolate the New England colonies after this American win. In the end, though, only General Burgoyne continued to Albany. They ran out of supplies because patriots hid and destroyed the food. Then Burgoyne and his army were forced to retreat to Saratoga by General Gates. The Continentals surrounded and captured his army in Saratoga. This victory inspired other countries like France and Spain to join the fight. They sent supplies and troops to aid the colonies, and they also sent foreign officers. Then Washington and his army were defeated by Howe and spent the winter at Valley Forge. So far, we have been defeated again by Howe. This time it was in Brandywine, and Howe captured Philadelphia. As far as we know, he has wintered there instead of finishing the British plan. Because of this defeat, we have wintered in Valley Forge. The conditions here are horrible, and I don't know how much longer we can last. There's a lack of supplies here, and most of the soldiers do not have shoes or jackets. The Continental Congress is very slow in getting money, and they can't help us. In the frontier, George Rogers Clark captured many British outposts. Also, he battled Henry Hamilton for Fort Sackville and won by making Hamilton believe that there was a bigger army than there really was. On the sea, American privateers attacked British ships. A famous privateer was named John Paul. He sailed all the way to Britain and attacked 2 British ships. He won the battle and sailed on one of the British ships back to America. The British then attacked in the south, and in 1778 they captured Savannah. Also, a British attack on Charleston was the worst defeat in the war. My name is Henry Clinton, and I am the British general that led troops into Charleston. This was a glorious win for the British, and it was also the worst defeat of the war for the Americans. So far, we have put Lord Cornwallis in charge of the British Army and have sent General Howe to fight the Americans. Hopefully, we will win this war and reestablish control of the colonies. America suffers another defeat at Camden, and morale is at an all-time low. In Yorktown, Cornwallis sets up a base on his own. George Washington then joins forces with French General Rochambeau. The Yorktown Peninsula is a perfect place for a trap, and together Washington and Rochambeau defeat Cornwallis. In 1781, the British negotiate a peace treaty. The war is over. I'm a colonist from Pennsylvania, and I can't believe what has happened. Our General Washington with Rochambeau led an unbelievable attack on Cornwallis at Yorktown. Cornwallis surrendered, and the British are signing a peace treaty. After all of this time, it is finally over. The British weren't just defeated by soldiers, but by civilian resistance that never gave up. The war was finally over. After the end of the Revolution, the Continental Congress asked the states to organize their own governments. The states divided their power between a governor and a legislature. The American people also had to make a national government, and they agreed that the country should be a republic. In November 1777, the Second Continental Congress drafted the Articles of Confederation, the nation's first constitution. I am one of the delegates that helped create the Articles of Confederation. These articles establish a weak government and let the states keep most of their power. It also gives Congress limited powers such as conducting foreign affairs and maintaining armed forces. Congress also can enforce taxes without asking the states. In the Articles, there is also no chief executive. Instead, there are congressional committees that lead the government. Overall, I feel that the Articles of Confederation are too weak to establish an effective national government. Many colonists were eager to settle in the land north of the Ohio River and west of the Appalachian Mountains. To settle this area, Congress passed laws such as the Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance. These laws helped set up land in this area and create different territories. The Northwest Ordinance also provided a Bill of Rights for the settlers. The Land Act was then passed in 1800 and made it easier to buy land in the territory to attract more settlers. Let's go check out some problems that the country had with its finances and other countries. I'm a congressman, and so far the Continental Congress is in debt from the war. The states voted against new taxes, and the currency has fallen in value. We can't solve our political problems with Britain and Spain because the states don't agree. All these problems show that we need a stronger central government. The United States went through a depression after the Revolution. This depression hit farmers the hardest, and eventually a former Army captain named Daniel Shea led a rebellion in Massachusetts. Joining the rebellion was a great idea. I got to fight for my rights as a U.S. citizen, instead of just sitting there and doing nothing. The rebels were finally defeated in a battle between the state militia and Shea's followers. The rebellion did, however, show that the national government couldn't handle unrest and violence and needed to be changed. Many states passed laws that encouraged the freeing of slaves. Slaves, however, were still discriminated against and made many of their own organizations. In September 1786, a convention was called in Philadelphia to discuss trade issues and to consider changing the Articles of Confederation. The 55 delegates at the convention didn't just revise the Articles, they wrote an entirely new constitution. There were two different plans. I'm Edmund Randolph, and I propose the Virginia plan for the new constitution. In this plan, there is a government with three branches: a two-house legislature, a chief executive, and a court system. Also, in both houses of the legislature, the number of representatives would depend on the population of each state. I'm William Patterson, and I propose the New Jersey plan. In this plan, the legislature has a single house, with each state having one vote. Also, Congress has the power to do things like set taxes and regulate trade. Just like the Virginia plan, there is a three-branch government with executive, legislative, and judicial branches. To deal with the issue of representation, the convention appointed a committee that created the Great Compromise. Roger Sherman said that in the Senate, each state would have 2 members. In the House of Representatives, the number of seats would depend on the population. Also, the 3/5 compromise said that every 5 slaves will count as 3 persons in the state's population. The delegates debated on putting a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, but the idea was defeated. On September 17th, 1787, the delegates signed the Constitution, and it went into effect with the approval of just 9 of the 13 states. Let's go and see some ideas in the new Constitution. Hey, I'm a delegate from the Constitutional Convention, and I'm going to talk about some ideas from the Constitution. The idea of popular sovereignty, that the government is subject to the will of the people, is in the preamble when it says, "We the people." There is also limited government in that the powers of the government are strictly defined. A republican form of government is established where the people rule through elected representatives who conduct the government and make laws. A federal system of government is established where state and central governments share power. There is a separation of powers between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches with a system of checks and balances. Lastly, there are individual rights included in the 10 amendments to the Constitution. These are the main ideas of the Constitution. Thanks for listening. Well, folks, that's the end of the show for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have learned something new. See you next time on the KevDev Quantum Leap Show. God bless America!